There was no sense of danger when an orange car pulled up to Anitria, Washington as she walked to a friend's house. A short man in the driver's seat hopped out of the car and politely offered her a ride. She declined at first but felt sorry for the man and eventually accepted the offer. After she got in, the man set off in the opposite direction of her friend's house, saying he had to swing by his uncle's home. All of a sudden, everything went quiet. Soon, she noticed blood flowing from her chest. She reached for the door, but the man stopped her. "Do not touch that door, or I'll shoot you again." Deborah Jackson, a 29-year-old black woman, was shot 3 times in the chest and her body was found in an alley near Vermont's Slauson area. But it wasn't a surprise. In the mid-1980s, the Los Angeles Police Department, or LAPD, became aware of an apparent serial killer targeting black women who were chronic drug users and street sex workers. The killer, dubbed the Southside Slayer, was believed to be responsible for stabbing and strangling at least 13 sex workers between 1983 and late 1985. Over the following years, it was found that serial killer Louis Crane committed at least 2 of the so-called Southside Slayer murders, and serial killers Michael Hughes, Daniel Lee Siebert, Chester Turner, and Ivan Hill committed at least 1 each. In addition, some of the murders may have been committed individually by women's clients or employers, unrelated to any serial killer. However, one particular group of killings remained unsolved and unaccounted for by any other known serial killer. The first known homicide in this series was the slaying of Deborah Jackson in August of 1985. Little did anyone know that this was just a teaser of what was about to come in the following years. 34-year-old Henrietta Wright was found dead in an alley under a green blanket with a gag stuffed in her mouth. She was shot twice in the chest. 23-year-old Barbara Bethune Wire was found dead in Central Alameda. 26-year-old Bernita Sparks was found dead in Gramercy Park. Lacrica Jefferson, a 22-year-old woman, was found dead in Westmont. Alicia Monique Alexander, an 18-year-old black woman, was found dead. In each of the above cases, the victims were forcibly assaulted before they were shot with a .25 caliber gun. Anitria, Washington got in an orange Ford Pinto with an unknown man to visit her friend's house. "Do not touch that door, or I'll shoot you again." As she struggled to remain conscious, the man forced himself upon her and took photographs with a Polaroid camera. After all of that, the man pushed her out of the car and drove off, leaving her for dead. But Anitria, Washington was a tremendously strong woman. She walked and dragged herself to the home of her friend. She lay bleeding on the front porch until her friend arrived and called an ambulance. Well, she made it in time and survived. And that would finally put an end to this deranged man's killing spree. Well, for 14 years. Princess Cheyenne Bartomeu was abandoned by her mother and was left with her monstrous father when she was a kid. He tortured her for years before he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. She lived in a loving foster home until 1997. Tragedy struck again, as first her beloved foster mother died and then her foster father became seriously ill as well. Then she had to go back into another foster care from where she ran away and became a sex worker. Unfortunately, she was only 15 when she was strangled to death by the man who terrorized the streets of Los Angeles in the 80s. Yes, he is back. After seeing himself on the news, he stopped carrying a gun. Also, during this time, the man was named the Grim Sleeper due to the long period of apparent inactivity between the serial killings. A crossing guard discovered the body of a black woman on a crosswalk near Westmont. Her name was Valerie Louise McCorvey. She was strangled, assaulted, and killed by none other than the Grim Sleeper. 4 years later, a woman named Janicia Peters was found near the same place where Bernita Sparks' body was found. In May of 2007, the slaying of Janicia Peters was linked through DNA analysis to at least 11 unsolved murders in Los Angeles, the first of which occurred in the year 1985. That same year, the LAPD formed the 800 Task Force, composed of 6 detectives, and their sole objective was to capture the Grim Sleeper. In early September of 2008, Los Angeles officials announced that they were offering a $500,000 reward to help catch the killer. It's the year 2010. A man was identified for arrest, at least in part, on familial DNA analysis. Police had found no exact match between DNA found at the crime scenes and any of the profiles in California's DNA profile database. So, they searched the database for profiles that demonstrated sufficient similarity to allow police to infer a familial relationship. They found similar DNA to a man named Christopher, who was convicted of a felony weapons charge in the year 2008. But Christopher was too young to be the Grim Sleeper, and in the 80s, Christopher looked kind of like this. So the familial DNA match led investigator to look at Christopher's father, Lonnie David Franklin Jr., as the likely perpetrator. Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was born on the 30th of August 1952. He grew up in South Central Los Angeles. Not a lot is known about Lonnie's childhood, other than the fact that Lonnie was a petty criminal and that kind of pissed off his dad all the time. He served in the US Army, and in 1974 he was stationed in Germany, where he forced himself upon a 17-year-old girl. Subsequently, he received a dishonorable discharge in the year 1975. Later on, he worked as a garbage collector in the mid-80s, and that is exactly when he started the serial killings, which would haunt the city of Los Angeles for the next 2 decades. One undercover police officer pretended to be a waiter at a restaurant where Franklin ate. The officer collected dishes, silverware, glasses, and pizza crusts to obtain DNA. Detectives then used a piece of discarded pizza along with saliva found on the victims to establish a DNA match. Well, it was a perfect match. Lonnie was arrested on the 7th of July 2010. He was charged with 10 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and special circumstances allegation of multiple murders in the case. On December 16, 2010, LAPD released 180 photos of women found in Franklin's home after unsuccessful attempts to identify the individuals, possibly additional victims. These people are not suspects. We don't even know if they're victims, but we do know this: Lonnie Franklin's reign of terror in the city of Los Angeles, which spanned well over 2 decades, culminating with almost a dozen murder victims, certainly needs to be investigated further, said the police chief Charlie Beck. In all, investigators found over 1,000 photos and several hundred hours of video in his home. The images show mainly black women of a wide age range, from teenagers to middle-aged and older, often naked. Police believe Franklin took many of the pictures, which show both conscious and unconscious individuals dating back 30 years. The photos were released to the public in an effort to identify the women. After a lengthy pre-trial discovery and several delays, the trial opened on 16th of February 2016, and 6 months later, on the 10th of August, Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was sentenced to death. On the 28th of March 2020, Franklin was found dead in his cell. His cause of death was unknown, and as of 2022, his cause of death and the results of the autopsy have not been publicly released. Well, in conclusion, Franklin mostly used to target black women, mostly drug addicts or sex workers. He knew that the media would never cover those murders, and unfortunately, he was right. In the 80s, the media was not interested in covering the deaths of countless innocent black women, and some monsters took advantage of this very, very sad situation. What's even worse was the fact that places where most of Lonnie's victims were found were actually 3 to 7 minutes away from his own house. Yeah, crazy stuff. So yes, that brings an end to this very sad event in our history. And pardon me if I made any grammatical errors. English is not my native language, so sorry for that. Also, if you enjoyed this video or if you like true crime content, you can give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and share this with whoever you want, I guess. If you want to support my channel even further, I do have a Patreon page. Speaking of which, shout out to my top Patreons. Oh, yeah, I forgot, I don't have any Patreons. So yeah, well, more cases are coming. So yeah, stay tuned and stay safe. Thank you.